A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend. ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with thelibertybeacon.com. And I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's L-E-N-A-R-D. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another ChristiTutionalist Politics episode, likely a midweek drop special. We are recording in May, just some behind the scenes. I don't know when this will drop. It will be a while out. But with me today is M.H. Elrich, Marie H. Elrich, but an author. Her author name, when you go to look for her, M.H. Elrich. It's not Elrich, and especially not M.H. Elricho, some Spanish lingo there, making her an elitist. She's an Elricho. My audience knows I can never pass on the most sophomoric of puns. So, welcome to the show, Marie. How are you tonight?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good. I'm a teacher, so I just got done finishing grading most of my finals. So I'm like, woohoo, excited right now.
Oh, interesting. And yes, since you're an author, for those looking on J. Leonard Detroit, BitChute, Brighteon, Rumble, or YouTube behind the scenes video, you will have seen I changed my background to show my books. I'm talking to an author, of course. Duh, I gotta show off my books too, right? But yeah, you are a fantasy writer. And well, but before we get to that, give us the 411, as we used to say way back when, I'm old, on who is Marie H. Elrich.
Yeah, I'm an author. I'm an avid reader. I love reading books when I can fit it in, and then I teach full time. So I'm pretty busy between those two things. But I'm involved with my church. I do tech team for my church, and I've been a Christian since I was a young girl. So that's something that's very important to me. And I mean, that's the name of this podcast, right? ChristiTutionalist Politics.
Yeah, I pronounce it ChristiTutionalist, but yeah, a lot of people do it that way. After the Greek Christos, ChristiTutionalist Politics. But hey, as the saying goes, call me whatever you want, just don't call me late for dinner, right?
That's true.
So anyway, before I so rudely interrupted you, born and raised where? Still living there?
Born and raised in Southern California, and I still live in that area. I have a husband. I've been married for 10 years. We don't have any children yet, but we always hope to have children. And but I would say I'm way used to California weather, where it's like a lot milder-ish than the rest of the world. I mean, I still get, where I live, I can get up till 100s and it not stop until October. And then it's hot at night, like 100 during the day and 90 at night. So I can get there, but it's not the same as, I'm sure, like wet heat or humid heat in certain parts of the country. So, but because I live in California, I have been to beaches and forests, and I feel like I almost have a fantasy landscape in my backyard that's easily accessible anytime I really just want to drive for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and I also, so besides being like a reader and a teacher, I also have helped out in the ministry side of things with like anime, just kind of ventured into that, written some articles for some people and been on some podcasts about talking about anime and how to deal with anime as like a Christian and how you should approach it, since it's very, very popular, especially with the young people. So I tried to kind of do a little bit of everything, I guess you could say, and a little bit of nothing. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, for
Well,
sure. I definitely need lots and lots of coffee to get through all the things that I get through in my one day.
yeah, well, you set up two things. One, another joke. Anime, no, you anime not. Boom, boom. But anyway, you mentioned weather. Yeah, like Michigan. Oh, I hate Michigan winters, but I stay, family, friends, and all that stuff. The four seasons are nice, but it's amazing how easy you get used to warmer than it is to adjust to colder. And like yesterday, 100 degrees, not a lot of humidity. If you could stay in the shade, is actually very pleasant, as opposed to yesterday here. Again, we're recording in May. I'll just say it, May 25th is the day we're recording. Yesterday, Friday, 80 degrees and 80% humidity. It's like swimming in a swamp. It's just horrible.
Yeah, that does not sound pleasant to me. And I know lots of people are like, you're crazy to stay in California. I mean, the politics and the costs of living are terrible, but it's the same reason you stay. I have family here, I have friends here, I have a community here, and I have no desire to leave that. Plus, I really feel like if all the godly people leave California, what's California going to do? I mean, it'll really go down in flames then. So,
Right.
we have to stay.
If we all surrender you're right. It will really go to hell in a handbasket more than it currently already has. And I get it. I've been to California several times. Beautiful, beautiful, uh, good weather. I love the Santa Monica Pier. You just want to have an armored vehicle to drive to get there, though, because the neighborhoods aren't so good till you get there. but but yeah, it's beautiful. But yeah, the deal with gruesome Newsom. Oh my God! And the taxes and yeah, the cost. The price of gas over $7 a gallon right now around here in Michigan. It's only $3.50 ish, which is high for us. Still like $1.50 higher than when Biden took office and destroyed our energy independence. But I didn't bring you on to discuss politics, even though the show is ChristiTutionalist Politics. I wanted you on. We're both members of Pastor Robert Thibodeau's FaithCasters. That's where we found each other, his wonderful organization. I hope to interview everybody that's a part of it, because he just started it recently. There's still not all that many of us signed up to it yet. But I saw you. That's great. And a fantasy writer, and we discussed offline, which is obviously where the tie-in to this show, the Krista part of it, in that, like C.S. Lewis and other fantasy writers, a lot of fantasy writers have biblical values and principles and morals in those fantasy writings. That is you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I consider myself more like Lewis in style of writing than Tolkien, even though I have very Tolkien-esque things. And the only reason I distinguish myself is because with Tolkien, there's a lot of audiences that are secular that would read his books and not even see the Christian allegory of Frodo taking the ring and destroying it being an image of Jesus taking the ring to like taking our sin upon himself. I think the allegory is very obvious, but there's so much debate about that.
Yeah.
Versus like C.S. Lewis would probably straight up tell you, of course, Aslan is Jesus. What do you mean? Like, how did you not get that from my novels? So
Yeah,
I
but
think
a
that
lot of that is the movies are, of course, compressed. You don't get it all as you do if you're reading the full novels, and the movies attempt to purposefully, willfully, and malice aforethought secularize and remove some of the religious symbology from it.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, the fact that Aslan, especially in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where Aslan like breathes on the statues, that's very much symbolic of the biblical idea of God giving us a new heart, of bringing us back to life from the dead. Like that's very minimized in the movie. Even the fact that Edmund, there we go. Edmund? No. Edmund, yes, Edmund. I was like double checking myself. There's two characters that have a letter E that are both redeemed by Aslan, so it's hard to remember all of them. But Edmund, he was redeemed by Jesus, and the fact that he's kind of almost like a Peter or Judas. He betrays Jesus, or he betrays Aslan and them, and then he's redeemed by Aslan. Aslan literally sacrifices his own life for Edmund so that Edmund doesn't have to die. Those are biblical parallels that you really don't get from the movie. They're just kind of glossed over. Like you don't really understand the deeper meaning of it. And even like Jadis, the White Witch, she is the epitome of kind of like that Babylon character, that idea of this evil, wicked woman that has come and seduced Israel from good and tried to put them in evil and is supposed to come back in the end times and also be that kind of person. So she is very much that if you read The Magician's Nephew. So like when you read The Magician's Nephew, you get a better understanding of her like beauty and evil all at the same time. So like if you hadn't read that and then you kind of just watch the movie, you don't get that like fuller picture of this like symbolic evil woman Babylon kind of figure that Lewis is going for in his books. So there's a lot that you just miss out on.
Yeah, I personally have not read the C.S. Lewis. I am, of course, versed in the Cliff Notes, and indeed did see Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe because I wanted to see what they did with it. But my fantasy is just not one of my preferred genres. I'm more comedy or sci-fi driven usually. But speaking of sci-fi, I had Don Galade on months ago. We were talking movies and TV, and again, biblical things creeping in, or the symbology, even Star Wars, right? The Emperor is the devil. I mean, it's pretty pure, pretty clear. There is the Force, right? A spiritual, faith-based thing. I'm even being an author, I sometimes grasp for words, right? But and even like TV. One of my favorite Star Trek episodes, even though Gene Roddenberry is purely a secular. I don't know if he officially called himself an atheist, but today he'd probably be a Scientologist. So Ron L. Hubbard type. But there was an episode called Parallel, which is one of my favorite episodes. And it's all about them going to a planet and they worship the sun. And through the episode, it's a play, right? They want to allude to they are worshiping the star sun, S-U-N, and then reveal in the end, no, it is the Son, Christ, Son of God, Jesus Christ, on that planet too. And I was like, I really? You would do that episode? I was amazed at that and thought that great because, like in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, although, yes, about terrorism, not a book about death, of life and living, not your normal traditional kind of fluffy Christian book, but it is a Christian book nonetheless. And I do the same kind of games in my Naperville chapter about we all need a savior, capital SAVIOUR, but hopefully no one that day around a terror attack would need a paramedic savior, SAVIOR, lowercase s, savior, on earth this day. So I love those sorts of plays, but putting aside Lewis and Tolkien, what is one of the titles of your book? And without giving too many spoilers, please tell us about that.
Okay, so my first book is The Tanya's Worth, and I have it right here so I can show the audience. So this is the first book in the series. It's a Christian fantasy series that centers around Tanya and Jakin and Kiel as they travel and have different adventures around Tamnari. During that time, they'll defeat an evil king, overthrow a wicked queen, and defeat a demonically possessed henchman as well. So I kind of have like demons in there, and then I also have powers in here. I kind of believe in this idea that each and every person has a natural talent and ability that's given to them by God. And in my universe, it's considered a superpower. So like they have different powers. So they can control wolves, or they control unicorns, or they can have fire powers, or something even specialer than that. Mm-hmm. That's given to them by God. And in fact, Tanya has a special gift that she uses that is designated from my God character, Melchizedek. And I have redemption arcs in my books, several in there. And this is the first book. I've written 3 full-length novels in the series. My third one just recently came out, and I'm going to have a box set, ebook set that will come out on Monday, so that those who are kind of like, I want all 3 so that I can get them, they can buy those. But essentially, it follows her in her journeys, and then I'm planning on writing more about her daughter, and that's the idea behind the title, Daughters of Tamnari, is just that with the books, it will follow Tanya first, daughter like 1, and then the next will be on her other daughters. So I kind of have that idea. Usually my audience is young women, so like most of the time it's women, but I found that men enjoy my books. And so I always say, like, yeah, of course, any man can pick up my book. I just don't generally market it that way. And then I have like Toothbreaker, which is kind of more like a wolf book. And I found that the guys like that one a little better, but it's more of a novella than a full-length one. But those are all like my books in my book series. I also have like a free short story for anyone who goes online. And then all of them except for 1, which I'm working on, 2 that I'm working on getting into audiobook. So people who like the audiobooks can also get them. But yeah, I've enjoyed writing them because I felt very inspired that they need to, like, people need to know, but in a kind of way that's like a parable, like one of Jesus's parables about the truth of the gospel, and yet also like be able to understand it. I feel like it's very realistic of the characters and their relationships. Like the first book is probably a lot more like innocent, kind of more coming of age, but like the second and the third book is like where Tanya and Kiel and Jakin all have to learn really hard lessons. And so they're kind of growing through that series together. And Jakin especially, who's kind of he's the father of Tanya. And so that as a father figure, he has to kind of learn how to be a better father, what it means to be a father, kind of throughout the whole entire series. And it's funny because I've never had children, as I mentioned, but I've had reviewers tell me, like, if they were a mom or a dad, Jacob is the one that they relate to, just because he's like the father figure and kind of sitting there going, what are these young people doing? So I kind of have him, I guess, there for all the people who are more like in that role. And I just know how it is to, I think there was like a line where, where you're walking in someone else's shoes. I think I'm able to do that a lot with my writing. And that's why people enjoy my characters.
I'm glad you held up the cover of the Tanya's Worth for those who see on the behind the scenes sneak peek video, but primarily most people hear this show audio only. So the iconography of your cover, I want to ask, it happens a lot. Is it purposeful? Is it subconscious? She's in red garb, sort of the Handmaid's Tale thing, that kind of iconography, symbology. Was that conscious? Did someone else design the cover? Tell us about that.
So I feel like I wrote my book before Handmaid's Tale was as popular as it is now. So no. But I would also, because I actually think Handmaid's Tale is not a great book, and sorry, judging to all those fans out there, I'm sorry, but it's like, as far as I can tell, it kind of degrades Christianity and the way that Christians are portrayed. And so in no way would I want to associate my book with Handmaid's Tale because of that. I would say that
that's the way that I see it too. I don't watch Handmaid's Tale, want nothing to do with it. I see it as a typical leftist attack on Christianity and anything to muddy the waters about real Christian beliefs and faith. And but chicken or the egg, really. Your book, as well as countless others, use that kind of red thing. It might even go way back to like Little Red Robin Hood. There's just that kind of thing in our mind. So yeah, they've kind of come and co-opted it from others to kind of discredit, in a way, in my mind, work like yours.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Ed Bondarenka, and I host Your American Heritage on Saturdays at 2 in the afternoon on this station. Your American Heritage is a show about the struggle we find ourselves in and how to react to it in the light of our biblical and American heritage. Listen to it while you're working around the house, the garage, cleaning the guns, walking the dog, driving, or just lazing around. Join me at 2 o'clock Saturdays here on Wham Radio, 1600 AM, 92.7 FM.
God bless America.
Yeah, and I actually chose it because I felt like most of my books are about kind of like God's love for you and how God cares for you. I thought of it like the red symbolism of the blood of Jesus, that his blood covers all our sins, that when we are clothed in righteousness, I know that eventually we will be given clothing that's white, but in my opinion, it's like red right now because our sins are covered. And so when I saw it, that's kind of what I pictured at the first time. But actually, most of the time what I get is the question of, wait, is this a Little Red Riding Hood book? Like what you're talking about? And I have to tell them, no, it's not, I promise. I just like that color because that's what I thought of when I first picked it out. But it's interesting how it's kind of evolved now. It's always something that you learn later on. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if someday someone's like, wait a minute, aren't those a lot like this or that? And it's like, well, I can't help it. So like even people have said, because I have elemental powers, but that my books have similarities to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I've had to tell them, well, first of all, I didn't actually complete the entire series of Avatar: The Last Airbender before I wrote my first book. And then secondly, I purposely don't have airbenders, which are the people who can use air, in my stories because I don't want to get accused of co-opting someone else's work. I promise you. Why don't we just say, all creativity comes from God, and maybe that's why we get some repetitions here or there.
Oh, yeah. I always say about my works, my books are not from me or of me. They are through me. They come from somewhere else. I am just the one who types them out. And people seeing, you probably see me keep looking over to the left. I'm looking over at my front door. I'm sitting in my living room, and I have a cross on the door. And normally there's a red ribbon there, the blood of Christ, right? Put the blood over the door, the Easter tradition. I'm looking up, I was like, where did my red ribbon go? The cross is still there. A red ribbon fell out. I got to find where that went, put that back up. At any rate, that's a weird rabbit hole. Certainly never intended to go down. But yeah, now note to self, where did the red ribbon go?
Yeah. Oh, I remembered something. Speaking of rabbit holes, I remember another reason I picked the red is because a theme verse of my first book was like, a woman who fears the Lord who can find, she's worth far more than rubies. And my idea is like ruby red dress. So I was thinking that verse too. So there's a lot involved with it when I saw the woman in the first place, but definitely not Handmaid's Tale. I appreciate you putting that out there so I can declaratively say, no, not at all associated with that terrible book.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad I was led to bring that out, because if I think it, others, and I certainly believe there was no association, so I'm glad you were able to indeed make that clear. But there are a lot of different symbology things that get used, and others then use it for something else, and the original intent and purpose gets diluted, right? Like the Little Red Riding Hood, I never read anywhere why it was a red hood or not. There's probably some importance in that and behind that, but also too, just in general, people use red a lot because red is that bright in your face, get attention color.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, I don't remember either from the story, but maybe it was like red is danger because like it was supposed to ward off danger or protect her in some way. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. A lot of things are co-opted. I mean, we better not get started on the rainbow, but that has been co-opted. So I'm just saying that things that are symbolic that used to mean one thing have been taken to mean something completely different. I mean, even in the anime I watch, there's like crosses and priest garb, and yet the way that they portray it is like very Eastern Hindu. They clearly have no idea what any of the symbology that they have in their shows even means. Like there was this show called Pastor Lawrence and Saint Cecilia, and literally you're watching it going, that's not what a pastor or a saint is, but they didn't do a bad job of portraying them as kind-hearted, serving individuals, but they don't worship the God that we worship. Like they don't serve that, and no one would claim that. But it's just funny because you're just like, okay, clearly they have some like understanding of these things, but they don't really know what they mean. It's almost like foreigners who wear English phrases on their shirts, and you're like, that does not mean what you think it means. Or even for us, we buy things that are like Chinese or Japanese, and they have, or Latin or Italian, and we have no idea what they mean. We could look at them and they could mean something terrible for all we know. So I feel like you have to be careful.
Hold on just a sec.
You're grabbing the t-shirt that says the wrong thing. I had a friend that had one. And it said, what did it say? It said eggs and basket. Oh yeah, I like that. I
in
like that shirt.
my show, I talk about God's 7-color rainbow versus the co-opted and corrupted attempt to distort yeah, LGBTQ plus elemental P plus minus equal divide sign, whatever it is this week, right? Community.
Yeah.
I'm in Michigan. This is from a Messianic Jew, Rabbi Kurt Schneider of Hillsdale area. Bought the shirt. Yeah, takingtherainbowback.com. So yeah, I talk
Nice.
about that a lot, and the back again, and the movement has begun again for takingtherainbowback.com, and of course I'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, it's all about taking that back from those who want to distort it and turn it into something it is not. And I'm making myself a note here.
Yeah,
I don't forget.
I think we should start wearing that June 1st, considering that, that June is Pride Month. So it's probably something we should start wearing during that time.
Well, that's why why he created the movement and the shirts, hoping we as Christians would indeed wear them out and about, and making that point, because there are people who don't understand there is a difference between the 7 and the 6 and what the actual rainbow signifies, and it has nothing to do with the LGBTQ agenda.
Well, and for me, I think I would much rather have an honest conversation with someone who's of that persuasion, if that's what it could do, where you could talk to someone honestly and not in hate, and kind of show them love and compassion, as I think Jesus would if he was here, and then try and help them. Because I've had several gay friends who honestly were like, when I listened to their story and what they went through, and I said, I can't agree with what you're doing because I believe it's a sin, but I love you, I care about you. If you ever need to talk, let's talk. They said, wow, you're like one of the first Christians that's ever listened to me and heard what I had to say. And it's like, I think that's very important. We need to be able to listen to what they have to say, and then hopefully having the ability to minister to them in the way that God calls us to in love and truth. So, I definitely like that. I don't appreciate how now it feels like we're so divided about these things, instead of trying to come around principles that all Christians should agree on. There are things that we should be united in, and we should be able to be, as a church, confronting these things in a loving and truthful manner. And it's very difficult. I'm a millennial. I feel like sometimes I'm one of the few out there that still follows Jesus. You sometimes feel like you're in the minority. Just because it's harder. I feel like my generation got really deceived and led astray, and I pray for them often that they'll come back and understand how much God cares, and that his calling for your life and his purpose for your life is way better than anything you have planned for your life. And if you follow his principles, your life will be a lot better than just following the principles of whatever party or platform or thing you want to follow.
And that's
so I really firmly believe in that.
This show is about the Bible in full context. And indeed, in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, there is a love versus hate chapter. One of those very Christian chapters in the non-traditional Christian book. It goes about that, right? Calling out fellow Christians. Matthew 7 really is, from the original Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Latin, condemn not, lest ye be condemned, because there are 12 other scriptures, as discussed on this show, where we are to judge biblically and not hypocritically, right? Remove the log from our own eye, judge on the same set of standards. I have several gay and lesbian friends, and we get along just fine. They know my view on traditional marriage. They also know I am with them on the civil unions thing to grant them legal protections of marriage without destroying marriage. It's an issue, fellow Christians. We are to love, not hate. And we see a lot of hate at times. Or I got to backpedal a little. We are accused of hate all the time, and that's not necessarily true, right? There are no Christians or Jews stoning gays and lesbians in the United States. However, that area over in the Middle East where there's conflict going on right now, if Queers for Palestine actually went there, you might get stoned to death. But yet Christians are supposedly the hate-filled ones, right? I love you. I want well for you. My gay and lesbian friends are of the tolerance and acceptance crowd. We get along just fine. I have no problem. Again, you know where I stand, but yes, I love you and I am willing to tolerate and accept you. What I cannot abide by is what I coin gaytivists who engage in gaytivism, pedophilia, and grooming. They're not about, we were born this way, please accept us. They're about recruitment. They're about expanding the lifestyle. That's not tolerance and acceptance. Again, that's pedophilia and grooming. Two different things.
It's like, yeah, we'll tolerate everyone except for you. You know, I that's their tolerance, right? It's definitely, you know, we get into more and more muddy waters, and I think that Christians need to be less and less afraid of speaking up and saying things. It's really hard being an author and a public figure to kind of walk that line where you're still reaching people and they can still hear you, because I think sometimes people plug their ears as soon as they hear the word, oh, you don't support gay, you know, you don't support homosexual relationships. How could you do that? And they just plug your ears before hearing your entire thing. And it's
Exactly.
like, just listen to the whole thing before you judge. Like, well, I'll do the same for you. I'll listen to the whole thing before I say anything. So it's definitely, your book is going to be needed. And I think the more books we have out there that are writing realistic things and showing the realism, but in a like fictional way, where it's like realism, but fictional, I think that's all too important. And reaches more and more people for the gospel of Christ, because then they'll get curious about this whole Christian thing, you know?
Yeah. Again, if you're looking for tolerance and acceptance, I'm absolutely in Christian love willing to give that. Ultimately, your lifestyle is between you and God, not me. Condemn not, lest ye be condemned. But again, if you're demanding that I don't just tolerate, but I advocate your recruitment of others into your lifestyle, no, I do not have to do that, and I will not do that. There is a difference. I don't hate you at all still, but there are red lines, right?
Yeah, and I think, that's the interesting part. Even with my villains in my book, like I'm thinking about the fact that my first villain and even my second villain, you can have a lot of more compassion on, but my third villain, it's like you don't. And the reason why, especially like my second villain, you have more compassionate on her, is because in her mind, she was doing everything out of like vengeance for her mother's death. And she justified her actions through wrong means. And then the first book, it's like the king was doing everything for the love of someone he loved and cared about. So he was motivated by his own for love for her. But the third one, it's like, no, I want power and I hate all of you and I hate everyone who's going to stop me. So I'm just going to kill and destroy everything I can and use anything I can to get my own gain. And I feel like more and more when it comes to politics and stuff, you find more of the third party rather than the first two, which is like, yeah, what you're doing doesn't really, that's not right, but you get more of like people who are just like, get out of my way, I'm going to force my way through. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I am so glad you brought that up. Motives and intentions and motivations. I've got 2 episodes on gray areas, which is leads off with the very important part, right? No one is usually, right? Usually, for every rule, there can be an exception, but usually no person is all good or all evil, all left or all right, all right or wrong, or good or bad, or whatever. Everything is not always pure black and white. There's lots of gray area. Bad people can sometimes do good things, and sometimes good people can do bad things when, like you point out, getting in the wrong mindset and having the wrong motivations. So they may not be really evil, they're just misguided.
Well, I would say yes, but I would also point out that in the end, God will condemn those who do those things anyway. So even if they're misguided, in the end, God says to them, that was still a sin, and you still shouldn't have done that. You know better by the law that God places on everyone's heart. So it's like, yes, you can have sympathy for these people, but in the end, God has a judgment of what is right and what is wrong, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard because like we want to have sympathy and we want to have compassion, but we also have to realize that there is a standard by which God will judge the world. And that standard is his word. And whatever goes against his word, he will ultimately judge people by. It's not necessarily our job to judge them, but it is God's job, And so our job really is to warn them, especially if they're believers, to say, look, I don't want you to end up in that bad place. I want you to be with God forever. I want you to have a right relationship with him. And so, talking again, the truth and love, it's kind of that balance between the two.
Right. And to invoke Godwin's rule, eventually everything always boils down to discussing Hitler, right? Hitler, I'm sure in his mind didn't think he was evil. He thought he was doing good things for whatever reasons he felt they needed to be done, right? I mean, gassing an entire people, I can't understand any justification you thinking is a good and righteous thing. But again, the point being, evil doesn't know or recognize their evil is the point there. And your third example, trying to go to that point. And back to my point about the tolerance and acceptance crowd is one thing versus the I demand you advocate and promote that lifestyle. No, there's a difference there. And I hate to keep coming back to that, but to me, that is a good analogy or metaphor, although I like to joke I'm too clever of an author to use metaphors. I use meta sixes. Bum, bum. But, that is exactly right. Or as Limbaugh used to say, trying to demonstrate absurdity with absurdity.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line. And it can be difficult, but I think that we're called to walk it, and we're called even to reach the most hateful individuals. I mean, that's why Jesus literally died at the hands of Pharisees who he thought would come to him, and Stephen did the same. He died at the hands of eventually first Saul, then Paul. So, Saul was there holding the cloaks of everyone who stoned Stephen, the very first martyr in Acts. So, these people who are still filled with hate, it's like, well, Jesus loved them, and so should we. And we shouldn't respond hate with hate. It just makes it worse. I love that Bible verse, though, that says, like, you're piling coals on someone's head every time you're kind to them. That makes me feel a little bit better. Just because it's so hard to be kind to people who are so hateful. But, the idea of piling coals on them just makes you feel a little bit like, okay, maybe, it's sizzling a little bit, getting through to them.
Yeah, and it's part of my show to kind of tie it with anti-Semitism. People who want to blame Jews of today for what happened then, or even all Jews of then, weren't all involved in the crucifixion of Christ, right? And even to a lot of degree, since Jesus, a Jew, came to fulfill the Jewish scriptures, not supplant them or replace them, a New Testament, yes, and the final blood sacrifice, so we don't sacrifice animals anymore. But the Jewish law, for the most part, still exists. Again, he fulfilled, was the King of the Jews, the Jewish Messiah. We are all, in a way, Messianic Jews, but yet anti-Semitism seems to prevail in this notion that all Jews throughout all time are responsible for Christ's death when it was preordained. In a way, they were part of God's pawns. They were required to play that part. So in a way, they weren't even fully responsible. It had to happen, or we didn't have Jesus the Christ dying for all our sins. It had to happen.
Yeah, it says, John, it says in the book of John, it says that Jesus laid down his life of his own accord. No one forced him to do it. No one did it. If Jesus said that about himself and what happened, that we cannot blame the Jews. We are grafted into their family. But I think a lot of this hatred for Jews is just going way back to the beginning of time. I think the devil and Satan hates God's chosen people. And I think that he continues to work through whoever and whatever he can to try and wipe out God's people, because he knows that God's people are the key, especially at the end times, with witnessing to people who are lost and need to come to Christ. So I think that's why he is so against them. And I think that's why I chose to portray a demon in my stories, is even though that's kind of controversial, I firmly believe in spiritual warfare as being live and active today. I don't think it's stopped. I think it's just gotten even more influential and more obvious about everything. I definitely believe that demons are out there and that you need to confront evil with the light of Christ, but they have no power. I don't believe they don't have any power over you. I don't believe we have to be afraid of these things. I think a lot of people are afraid of demons and stuff. I'm like, you don't need to be afraid, because Jesus Christ is more powerful than any other being out there. He is superior. He is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And so, it's just very important to remember that. But I firmly believe a lot of this is just, Satan's plan for the people, God, to try and destroy them so that they're not effective for God.
I've talked about this several times with other guests. Exactly right. It's Satan's desire to have Christians forget our love one another, and that Jesus came to fulfill the Jewish scriptures. He was a Jew himself. We are all technically Messianic Jews, but that Satan wanting us to hate rather than love. Even the divisions between the Christian sects, Catholicism, Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, thisism, thatism, the other whatever. It's Satan wanting us to focus on our divisions and things that we would argue about. And part and point of this show and my ChristiTutionalist politics books, 1 and 2, to make that point. Satan wants us focusing on those petty differences rather than us focusing together on all the things Jesus said we do agree on and should be focusing on. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I recently taught and read the Screwtape Letters, and that's a book by C.S. Lewis, kind of going full circle, I guess. And it's about the demon Screwtape. I know, call back. This demon Screwtape is writing letters to his nephew Wormwood, and it's amazing to me. I mean, these letters were written in the middle of World War II in the 1940s. We are almost 100 years later. We are getting close, and they are still relevant. He was talking about how demons use basically this idea, the divisions between the churches, like what you're talking about. Demons want you to be divided. They want you arguing. They want you thinking about Christianity and something. They want you in extremist camps, division, and thinking about other things besides God. And I just found it fascinating because you're reading this almost 100 years later, and I'm like, wow, it's still relevant today. Everything I'm reading is still relevant today. And it's, yeah. I'm just impressed.
and it goes back to my terror strikes coming soon to a city near you. It's not just about Islamic terrorism. It's about all terrorism, including the Tokyo Om Shinryoku Christian cult that engaged in terrorism. So, but there's that division thing again. I'm drawing a blank on his name now. The author of Reform, Battle for the Soul of Islam, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Love him to death. We can get along just fine. The problem is what I call Gijas, Global Islamic Jihadist Interim Army Soldiers, the Islamo-fascists, the ones that want you to forget that the Quran actually contains Genesis, actually contains Noah, actually contains Jesus as a prophet, but not the Son of God. They call Christians and Jews children of the book. We are supposedly to worship the same God, but those who have hate, Satan has taken down the other path of division, want us to forget all that brotherly togetherness that was supposed to be there, that is there in the Quran and has been bastardized by all the other Islamic texts outside of the Quran. So again, I've got a lot of Muslim friends, no problem. They are Quranical. The Gijas are extra Quranical and focusing on what Satan wants from them, and that is the division and hate rather than the love. At any rate, I usually keep the show 30 minutes-ish. We're going on 50 now, so let me do the usual proverbial expected podcaster thing. The final question, if people want to find you, where do they go to find you, to reach out, to learn more about your books? You have a website?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is to go to my website, which is mhelrich.com, and it's spelled Elrich, so it's like MAELRICH.com. There you can sign up for my newsletter, get that free ebook.
El Richo.
Yes.
No.
Hey, if it helps people remember,
Yeah. Hey,
just don't take it. Take off the O.
Yeah, idiotic name association sometimes works. And no, she's not a J.K. Rowling. She's not rolling in the dough. She is not El Richo. She is Elrich.com. But anyway, I interrupted you again. Please go on.
Yeah, so it's all good. So that's the website, and then I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram under that same username. But I primarily would love for you to join my newsletter and really get the behind the scenes, get to know me a little bit better. So definitely please go to the website and click the little drop down bar and go to newsletter and sign up, and you'll get a free ebook. So it's all good.
Hey, I also wrote, you could see it on the screen for those seeing the video, how to write a book and get it published, hints, tips, and techniques. And indeed, obviously, marketing promotion is a big chapter of that book, obviously. And yes, giving away something free is always a great marketing and promotion tool. I indeed also have what I call my Terror Strikes Insiders. I sent out an insider email the other day of when the Iranian guy, good riddance to you. Now, obviously, I don't generally say that in public because we are to love, but the world is a better place without him. So yeah, I sent out a Terror Strikes Insiders subscriber newsletter the other day too. That's great. I hope people will indeed go to Elrich.com and sign up for your newsletter. I'm not giving away free ebooks, so you're gone one better than me. And get your free ebook. Thank you, Marie, for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, no fancy high production intro or inserts, at least yet, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help to grow the show.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.